Go ahead and get into it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear sisters and brothers. To all those who are watching, to all those who may be watching in the future, and to you, my dear brother John.
Salam, salam, brother. Uh, yeah, I guess we're live, right? Are we
Yes, we
going?
are. Yes, this is our first ever live session for the Radio Resistance podcast, and of course, of all days that we did decide to um, produce this special episode, and why we chose to go live today specifically is a result of the day itself, it being the 15th of August, exactly 1 year since the tragic fall of Kabul in Afghanistan uh, to the Taliban terrorists.
Yep. So, what happened last year on this date was one of the most significant events in the history of Afghanistan, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely,
Right.
100%. Yeah.
Um, I guess the first thing that I want to kind of, if I were to just discuss this with anyone, the first thing that I would say is it's been a year. A year is not necessarily a long time. I mean but for such a significant event, right? The reaction of the world has just been the biggest thing that stood out to me. Obviously, we can go into, and we will go into, what the Taliban have been doing, and the how the situation has been unfolding in the country. But most people already know that. At least our audience already knows that, right? But just as us having this conversation, what stands out to you the most in this past year? I guess let's start there, and then we can just keep bouncing off each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, uh, the, many have phrased and or coined a specific term to describe this past year, right? We or even this day, we're hearing a lot of people use the word the Black Day or the Day of Darkness or the Year of Darkness, right?
Hmm.
Personally, myself, I'm an optimist, right? And despite uh, what you just shared right now as one of the most key and crucial, um, I think, talking points for us to actually discuss on this episode as well, the world's silence at large, the world at large, their silence, right?
Hmm.
In the face of the not just many atrocities, but in the face of a entire country being handed to terrorists,
Yeah.
it's not the vast majority of what happened is not surprising, right? We knew that this is these guys who were handed power are terrorists, and we knew that events like what did unfold were going to unfold, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say, I'm focusing on the light. I see a light at the end of this very dark tunnel that we're in. Sure, it has been a year of darkness, 365 days plus that
Hmm.
girls have not been allowed to go to school, from secondary education onwards, right? Boys in many areas. There's multi-ethnic genocides taking place in Afghanistan. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And if we decided to make this episode about Taliban atrocities and war crimes and their brutality and all of that,
Yeah.
we'll be sitting here for hours talking about every single incident and every single atrocity they've committed. But again, to answer your question, what stood out was what happened on this exact day as well. An individual, the son of the national hero of Afghanistan, Ahmad Massoud, took a stand. The world abandoned us. When I say us, Afghan diaspora, Afghanistani diaspora, those inside of Afghanistan, uh, those who gave up their lives, whether they were Afghan, whether they were from Afghanistan, or those who um, were our allies in this war against those same individuals who were handed power,
Hmm.
handed this country, right? So what what stands out the most, what I think is the most significant event from everything that's occurred in the last year, is first and foremost the stand that Ahmad Massoud took against the Taliban, and essentially that being leading to the formation of a what's been coined as the anti-Taliban resistance, or what they call themselves, the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. And we can talk more about exactly what they've done in the past year and all of that, but um, that for sure is what stands, what I think is what would be the most significant event that occurred in the past year. Some may think that this was a since Afghanistan hasn't been liberated yet. We're 1 year into the Taliban occupation, and Afghanistan has not been liberated. Well, that can't be the greatest or the most significant event that took place. But no, in fact, it definitely is, because it has set the grounds for the problems of not just the past 20 years, but the problems from the very inception of this nation state called Afghanistan, once and for all being addressed. And the way I see it is that we have a revolution in the works.
Right.
How about you, Zubair? What would be what event stood out the most, or what would be the biggest
Well, I think,
takeaway?
yeah, and it's basically twofold. I think it's either going to be from one angle, it's going to either be the idea of the Taliban, right? There's a terrorist organization that took over this country. That's like 50% of it. And then the other 50% is the reaction to that, right? Which is what you said. So I think to people from Afghanistan, the way that they reacted is kind of either one or the other, or it could be a combination. But some people are more amazed, or more focused and with this whole concept, which is amazing, right? Of a resistance that came out when everyone else fled, when everyone else basically gave up. There is no other option, and all of a sudden you have not just any resistance. It's coming from such a charismatic figure, right? This is the son of the legendary Ahmad Shah Massoud, who came out on that day when we see him boarding that helicopter. That scene was in itself was almost like cinematic. It was amazing. It was like, first, for a lot of people, it was unreal. They're like, wow, someone did something. Because most people gave up hope. They're like, it's over. But when he is the only one that took that stand, yeah, so that is something huge. But I would say what's even more, like, in terms of like surreal, is the idea that that people don't understand. I think most of the world, they don't fully understand who the Taliban are or what they've done, and specifically the relation or the experience that the people of Afghanistan have had with the Taliban. That's what people don't understand. They don't realize that the people of Afghanistan dealt with the Taliban from 1996 to 2001. See, it's only been 1 year that's passed so far, and already to many people, they're like in disbelief and they're in shock that, like, how could this have happened, right? But back then, from 96 to 2001, the people dealt with 5 years of that. And then on top of to follow up with that, it's not like the Taliban just disappeared, or the people's experience with the Taliban just ended there. No, and then we had 20 years of an insurgency where on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, we had, the Taliban just committing atrocities, killing people through their bombings, right? Car bombs, IEDs, suicide bombings, just shootings in schools, in hospitals, in mosques, in marketplaces. 20 years of that is a lot. I think people don't realize that. One second.
Yeah, no.
So
Go ahead.
I think 20 to deal with 20 years of that, So far we're at 26 years of dealing with like the biggest oppressor in Afghanistan. The biggest problem for the people of Afghanistan has been the Taliban. And now add on top of that another full year of the Taliban being in power again. So 27 years that the people of Afghanistan have been dealing with this terrorist organization. And that's the group that's in power right now. And
Have been dealing with
the craziest part is that they haven't changed. That not even in the slightest bit have they changed. It's just a repeat of their ideology and their habits and their practices from 96 to 2001 and from the last 20 years. That's what stands out to me is that this is such an urgent or this is such an important thing that's happened, but the world has just the reaction to it is so nonchalant. I mean, the international community is just they're trying their best in every media out most of the mainstream media outlets, right? In most countries and their diplomats, the governments, like in Britain, like we saw, the UK. It's just everything that they say is an attempt to kind of normalize the Taliban. And that's the part that stood out to me the most. And we're not even don't even get me started on the reaction of the Muslim world towards the Taliban. That's a whole conversation on its own.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? I think it goes hand in hand with another issue as well, which was something that the international community assisted a group of terrorists with, right? And that was the whole PR campaign, right? We you know, when you mentioned that the majority of the world, in relation to their silence, I don't blame the common lay people of any society, to be quite frank and honest with you, Zubair. I don't think it would be fair for us to blame common lay, whether it be Muslim in the Muslim world or be it in Western countries or anywhere, because it's the governments to either save face or they had national interests of their own with seeing the rise of such a group in Afghanistan, right? Or for other reasons that actively participated, contributed to this large-scale whitewashing of terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Terrorism, bro. Like these are the same guys for 20 years that were every time they blast a mosque, CNN would broadcast it and put in, you know, we'd see it on every single news network around the world.
That's what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying before. I'm like, this is what's surreal to me is that like did people forget about this? Like 20 years of just, it was every week. It was like almost every other day. It was just, I remember just scrolling through Facebook or like, you know, you get a WhatsApp message or something, or just on CNN, like you said, just there was always a bombing that would happen. And it's like people seem to have forgotten about what we went through. And it's like they just want us to like forcefully accept this group now when we never have and we never would. It's just these people are foreign to us. This ideology is foreign to our people. That's what the world doesn't seem to understand.
Yeah. I think one of the nuanced issues that are kind of downplayed when these discussions of what happened in Afghanistan take place, is a discussion of Pakistan's involvement. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, today being the marking of the 1 year since the fall of Afghanistan, I think it's a great opportunity for us to mention and perhaps touch on, go a little into their involvement in the current situation of Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm talking about way back when we go back into before the war on terror, since 2001, right? Mm-hmm. Since the Taliban's last rise to power in the 90s, right? This was a proxy group back then. It's a proxy group today. they've been supported by Pakistan's intelligence services agency, Pakistan's ISI.
Right.
There's clear and substantial evidence for this claim. This isn't something that's new to anybody.
Right.
It's 100% factual, and when when you mention, and I completely agree with you as far as the world's silence, I think that that's a big part of it. I think that's a big part of it because of the fact that Pakistan so deeply invested in this terrorist group for their own national interests, right? It benefits them. One example would just be the use of, where Pakistan Taliban can use, Afghan Taliban to attack Kashmir, for example. That's just one example, right? But intentionally, Pakistan is building and has built the foundation of a terrorist network, the Haqqani network, against India, and to do terror inside Kashmir, and they're using Afghanistan as a scapegoat. I think that this is something that's very important, and from all the conversations I've participated in the past few days, right, there's been a lot of conversations, at least amongst those who still do care, that are taking place, and this is something I feel like there's not enough attention being paid to. I don't know. What are your thoughts on
Well, just like a 5-second recap, I guess, for anyone that doesn't know the role of Pakistan, with what you're saying, how they supported the Taliban. We know that Pakistan played a good role at a certain time, right? In the 80s. See, this is something that needs to be made clear. Not every country or superpower or group is necessarily always wrong or always right, throughout time, linearly. The positions change, policies change, right? So, for example, Pakistan played a good role in the 80s, where they helped the people of Afghanistan when America was also playing a good role. But it was in America's interest, right? They didn't want to see the Russians, the Soviets, expand into Asia. So when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan happened, America obviously assisted the people of Afghanistan, funneling aid and weapon via Pakistan, right? So they send the weapons to Pakistan, and Pakistan does a good job, and they send those weapons to the people of Afghanistan, the Mujahideen, the people of Afghanistan who formed different groups, but all had the same cause in fighting the communists, fighting the Russians, right? At that time, we have to appreciate what Pakistan did. And what happened afterwards was when the Soviet Union was defeated and the communists were out, this is where Pakistan kind of should have stepped away or should have played a better role. But instead, this is where they started having a more sinister role. They started supporting certain groups that had more extremist ideologies or that was loyal to Pakistan's interests. In this case, it was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who also at that time in the 80s played a good role. He fought the Russians, right? But then he turned evil in the early 90s, and unfortunately, this is not a laughing matter. He bombed Kabul, killed tens of thousands of people. And with that happening, unfortunately, the entire freedom fighters, all of them get painted with the same brush, and they all kind of, to some people, lost credibility in general, even though it was certain groups doing it, starting it, while certain other groups were just defending the country. In this case, the northern Ahmad Shah Massoud was the defense minister of Kabul, right? He's defending the country, and Hekmatyar is bombing the country, supported by Pakistan. And and Massoud gets blamed for it, right?
This is sorry, Zarjan, just quickly,
go ahead.
And I hope you don't forget your point here. But that's a very, very, very common theme when I see discussions happening pertaining to today's resistance in Afghanistan, right? When you said that, the painting with the same brush, right?
Yeah.
For those who are genuinely interested in all the details of this, please do refer to episode number 2
Episode 2, yeah.
of our podcast, where we interviewed an individual who I love when he says, "Man, I'm not Afghan, I'm not Tajik, I'm not Hazara, I don't come with any bias."
Right.
Who is it? Sheikh Abdullah Anas from Algeria, who, due to the holy concept of jihad in Islam, right?
Yeah.
What is jihad? Jihad is a defensive struggle. There's no such thing as a offensive jihad in Islam, or an offensive war in Islam. You're not only is it your right, but it is a responsibility that falls under the shoulders of a Muslim if their home is attacked, if their family is attacked, to stand up and defend oneself, right? So this is why in practical terms, you used the word freedom fighter earlier. I think we should be, and I'm not saying that you were being apologetic in any way. They are freedom fighters, but they were also mujahids.
Of course.
And we're very proud of this.
Yeah.
The National Resistance Front of Afghanistan just released their a statement and a document outlining their basic principles, or their foundational and essential principles. And number one of those foundational and essential principles is our the declaration of our identity as Muslims, and as those who are who are not just justified, but our struggle is a dignified one because of our religious views as well. This is where our religious views are actually
justified, or
not just justified, but also these are those values that are also considered universal today, right? Standing for justice, right? Believing in peace, for example, right? And all of that. But the point was that when you mentioned that today, unfortunately, this word of warlords, or what was it you mentioned? The entire mujahideen, who, in other words, or to translate that term, those who were partaking in jihad, which the most appropriate simplified translation of this world would be a defensive struggle.
Yeah.
Right. Back in our first resistance against the Soviets, right? And then against those who are claiming to be the only ones with the right interpretation of Islam, this proxy terrorist group, right? So anyway, just that point of all of these individuals being painted with one brush. I think that's a very, very important one that needs to be stressed in every discussion and pertaining to the efforts of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, because in no way whatsoever is the struggle of, whether it be the late commander Ahmad Shah Massoud or that of his sons Amir Saib Ahmad Massoud, in no way can they be compared to the likes of those extremists and terrorists like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, and or those who are a part of the Taliban today.
Right. Yeah, I didn't mean to go into a whole tangent of like a history.
My apologies, brother.
No, it's okay. I started it. I was gonna just wrap it up really quick, because when you asked about Pakistan's role, you can't explain it without having context, right? If you just blame one person without explaining why they're to blame.
Well, I could say it in one sentence.
Yeah.
And of course, you're right. No, you're right, Zubair. It needs context, and perhaps we would need even longer than the amount of time we've already spent to provide the full context. But in a single statement, just to put this current state of Afghanistan in one sentence, in my the way I see things, Afghanistan is just being used as Pakistan's backyard right now.
Yep. Taliban are their proxy. Yep.
This past year, that's been the case.
Yeah.
This entire year, the year of darkness, Black Day today, Pakistan is using Afghanistan as its backyard through its proxy and proxy force, crime syndicate, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Right?
And this
Terrorists.
is just a message to, obviously, I say this all the time in my posts when I've posted on Facebook or Twitter, like when we blame Pakistan here, we're not being like, what's the word? Like unfriendly or hostile towards like your average Pakistani citizen, like that you see in the street, like some of my friends and stuff like that. This shouldn't, if you're like a rational person, you shouldn't take offense to us criticizing the policies of your government, which is a failed state. And that you shouldn't take offense to when someone says a failed state. Most of the Muslim world are failed states, right? And throughout the Middle East, in Asia, there's just all we see from the Muslim world in the past few decades are just essentially failed states. And look, you don't represent them and they don't necessarily represent you. These are man-made borders and, installed puppets and whatnot. You shouldn't, I don't see the sense of taking things personally. So when we're criticizing Pakistan here, we're criticizing the actions of the government and certain elements of the government, specifically the ISI here. Because this isn't a laughing matter. This isn't a light matter when people, tens of thousands of people in the last 30 years have been killed. Like, this is innocent blood that's just been spilled. This is not a simple thing. This is a big deal. These are our people. We feel hurt. So of course we have every right to criticize those who are supporting these terrorists, right? And in the same way, Pakistan's not innocent. It's not just Afghanistan. They're doing the same thing with the Uyghurs in China, right? These people are in concentration camps, and when the Muslim world, says, oh, they bring up the Uyghurs every once in a while, people fail to pinpoint which Muslim country is hypocritically in bed with China, the communist state of China that's supporting these Uyghurs. So Pakistan is doing two very hypocritical and just wrong, carrying out these two wrong policies against fellow Muslims when they claim to be this Islamic country. But anyway, we gave Pakistan way too much attention, I think.
Right, yeah.
Right, let's move on. Do you mind if we discuss really quickly the whole phenomenon of like the Muslim world in general? Let's not take. Let's look at the time right now. Maybe like 5 to 10 minutes max, right?
Yeah, sure.
Why does the Muslim world react the way they do to the Taliban in Afghanistan? Right. August 15th happened. We saw the reaction of the Muslim world. It was either silence or it was mainly support. Right. They cheered on the Taliban. Now I could summarize it, but I spoke a lot. So go ahead. What would you say? What's your take on that?
Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
The Muslim world's reaction to the Taliban. Like, how would you analyze that? Like, when August 15th happened, right? The Muslim world in general, countries, general populations, right, of people that maybe on Twitter, on social media, they either were silent or they straight up cheered on the Taliban's takeover. So how would you react to that?
Yeah. So I think that there's in terms of reaction, right? I think there are a lot of differences between the Muslim world's response and reaction and that of the rest of the world in the international stage or global stage. But there are some similarities as well. And I think I want to touch on the similarities first. Okay. Mm-hmm. The problem, or one of the biggest of problems, was the narratives that nation states all around the world, whether they were part of the Muslim world or Ummah or countries in the West or wherever in the world they may have been, the narrative that was being sold to their people, right? So again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that we can really blame the common lay or average citizens and residents of these countries belonging to these Muslim nation states. So, for example, I think this is a great topic that you brought up, right? And in fact, let me go ahead and share an experience. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen this too, but we're quite active. For those of you guys watching for the first time, we're on Twitter and Afghanistan Twitter, at least, right? I've noticed something. I've noticed many since last year have been reactionary to a certain degree, I believe justified as well, right? When it comes to the lack of support, or the lack of support from the Muslim world, and specifically the specific example that I wanted to bring up right now was that of the resistance happening in the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli occupation forces.
Okay.
Now, you see, in both of these situations in the world, right, you have an indigenous people resisting against occupying forces. Now, without getting into the differences and the similarities and all of that in these two situations, just relating this to our reactions, right? I can't hold those Muslims accountable, because the narrative that the entire world has sold to them is that, hey, these people are Muslims. They're practicing. They're good Muslims. They just fought off this infidel force who came in and fought against Afghans and were killing Afghans for the sake of more bloodshed in the Muslim world.
Just a quick interjection. When I'm saying, like, let's talk about the Muslim world, I'm not saying let's blame them, because you said it a few times. You're like, I can't really blame them. I wouldn't blame. It's not about blaming them. We're not here to put people on blast and to call out the Muslim world. No. We're just trying to explain how they're seeing it and how that could potentially be a mistake. So you're explaining that right now, and that's what we need to do. So
gotcha.
Go on,
yes.
Continue.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, thank you for that important clarification. Yeah. So, and we're both on the same page there.
Yep. Yeah,
Neither one of us are blaming.
No, there's no point to blame anyone. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I can think that's the ultimate point that I wanted to make. That the world at large, and this is the similarity between the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world. The world at large has what happened, or the story, wrong. Now let's go ahead and, as briefly as possible, try to provide the correct narrative of what actually happened. Okay. How do you feel about this right now?
Let's do it.
You think we can accomplish that in about 7 minutes? That gets
just
us
keep
to
time.
Our 45 minutes.
Yeah, you gotta keep track of the clock though.
Yep.
So how long do you want? You want to split this? You take 3 minutes and I take 3.
Sure. Let's go. Okay. So
you go first.
All right. So first and foremost, I think there's 3 things that are on my mind, but I want to touch on one of them before handing the torch off to you, brother. So first and foremost, there's something called the Doha talks that took place, right? During these Doha talks, right? Sorry, I do have to mention this to actually, for context, to be able to discuss the Doha talks.
No, don't be sorry. You got 3 minutes.
Ever since,
not giving
ever since 2001, okay, when Afghanistan, along with strategic allies and partners, came to the decision to form a new nation state, right? There was something in that formula that was proposed that was fundamentally flawed. And what that was the creation of a nation state that was highly centralized. We saw its effects in the early days, in the Karzai days, and we saw its effects even more so during the days of the former, they call him President Farari in Farsi, and Farari means the one who fled, the traitor, Ghani. Okay? So why this context is important is to understand how those Doha talks went wrong. The intention behind those talks were great. They were meant to bring everybody in Afghanistan together to figure out a solution to allow for those who committed to this war on terror to withdraw from Afghanistan, something that all of Afghanistan, all the people of Afghanistan wanted. Mm-hmm. There's no disagreement amongst the people of Afghanistan when it comes to that issue. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, world, for joining us in this battle and war against terror. We there was a lot we accomplished together. Things that were not even part of your promises that we are grateful for, right? And we're ready to assist you in your withdrawal as well. But let's just make sure. I mean, the idea would be to make sure that we reach a position that is going to be one where, when this withdrawal takes place, it doesn't lead to what actually happened. Okay, so the Doha talks, the significance here is that due to this highly centralized republic being in place, and that being led by a ethno-nationalist this former president we just mentioned, Ghani, right? Mm-hmm. And his counterpart here in the United States of America, Zalmay Khalilzad, right? These talks happened behind closed doors, right? They happened without the people of Afghanistan being involved in these talks, and they led directly to the handing over of power from the centralized, ultra centralized government to a group of terrorists. Some call this the Great Conspiracy. Do your own research, look into the facts, and you'll see that this is not a conspiracy. These are the cold hard facts. President Ghani himself, in his latest interview, in his first interview since the fall of Kabul, he did not address or respond to a single one of the questions that Sigar had raised in relation to his fleeing and his involvement in the events that unfolded after the fall of Kabul. So that's, I guess my 3 minutes are over there. But Doha, the significance of these Doha talks, and then as far as those who were involved, we've discussed this in a previous episode as well. But to recap events, right? It started during former President Donald Trump's time, but the actual withdrawal itself happened under the sitting President Biden's watch. And that's something, and I'll leave it with, I'll stop right here. That is something that the people of Afghanistan, including myself, will never forget. We'll never forget. We were betrayed by this current administration. There's no doubt about that. And they had a role. And I am very grateful and appreciative to all those Americans who are indeed aware, and they still do care, and they have done their due diligence and haven't simply, just watched the 5-minute stream of Biden's blaming everything on Afghanistan's National Defense and Security Forces. Mm-hmm. We've got in our, I think, first episode, we did go into how that part of the narrative was entirely false, and Afghanistan's National Defense and Security Forces disintegrated entirely due to reasons relating to what we just discussed as well. But yeah, that I would say between those three things that I had in mind, the Doha talks would be the the one that I would say holds most significance in relation to what led to the fall of Kabul.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up that point, because that's not what I was gonna that's not the point that I was gonna make, but it's an important point. So I'm glad you took that one, right? Because well, we were trying to come to the reason why the reaction of the Muslim world, right? That was one of the main things that we were trying to get to. So that's what I'm going to summarize, right? I'm going to summarize my take on why certain people react to the situation in Afghanistan, right? To last August, why they reacted the way they did, right? So just to put it briefly, it all has to do with our mindsets, right? The anti-imperialistic mindset that we have as people who grew up in the West, right? And this all took place, right? This anti-imperialist narrative really formed when the United States, it mainly started with 9/11, right? After 9/11 happened, America went into Afghanistan, right? To start this war on terror. It all started with the war on terror. But Afghanistan wasn't the main thing, because there was a lot of people that understood the reaction, right? I mean, you have two planes that go into the World Trade Center, knocks down these magnificent towers, kills 3,000 people. I mean, any country in the world would have retaliated if you go by that narrative, right? That these terrorists hijacked planes who were harbored in Afghanistan. The mastermind is in Afghanistan. They crashed these planes into the buildings, and 3,000 people die. Any country in the world would have invaded. They would have went in and to go after the culprits, right? The mastermind. Now, what really gave America this like negative image, right? This perception was the invasion of Iraq in particular, right? When Iraq got invaded, that was a war that there's like consensus on that other than the neocons or whoever you want to, the extremist groups, whoever is in support of all and every war, right? Other than them, everyone is pretty much in agreement that Iraq shouldn't have happened, or it was a mistake at the very least. It was a mistake. Now that's when America gained this really negative kind of perception and this negative reputation. And the Muslim world in general, when they saw those clips and the videos of like, let's say Guantanamo Bay or all whatever war crimes that happened, this really built up in the Muslim population, and they said any war that America took place in was just always by default seemed as wrong. Every occupation, every war, every bombing, whether it was drone strikes or a full-on war, right? In Syria, in Libya, whatever you want, you name it, right? It was always just the Muslim world in general reacted, and you can't blame much of the Muslim world. This is why I said we're not blaming. We're not here to expose and to put blame on them. We're just trying to understand their perspective, but to explain it to them that this is how you're thinking, but it's not necessarily right. So now when we have fast forward 20 years, the longest war, right, in the history of, in modern history, in the history of America, at least, of the West, this is the longest war ever. Now, after 20 years of this, right, bin Laden was taken out. Al-Qaeda was supposedly not in the country anymore. People were like, well, what are they still doing there? This is ridiculous. This is the longest war. So people started developing this mentality that the Taliban are just the people of Afghanistan, and they're just resisting and they're defending their country, and they're fighting the occupying forces. That's a term we see all the time. The occupying forces. The Taliban were just fighting them, right? Now, what people don't realize, obviously, when America withdrew on the end of August, Taliban took over August 15th, the Muslim world reacted in a way that they're like, wow, this is great. America finally lost, right? That's why the context was important, that everything that happened. Did you want to jump in, or?
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm almost done.
I'll tie in why I brought up the Doha talks
Of course.
Yeah, but
No,
go
that
ahead, please.
yeah. So now, of course, their reaction on August 15th, for the most part, was like a celebratory reaction that like America lost. the Muslims won. It's just they simplify it. It's black and white. The Muslims won. They defeated the occupiers. So that's how, when you talk to the average Muslim, like whether it's you go to the mosque and you talk to the average Arab or Pakistani, they're going to have this reaction. And it's like, what they don't realize is that the people of Afghanistan suffered more under the hands of the Taliban than they did towards, under the attacks or under the invasion of America and NATO. This is just a fact that people don't realize. People think they just simplify it, where they're like, America was just killing Muslims in Afghanistan, when that's not the case, right? I explained before, 6 years of the Taliban, 6 years of brutal, barbaric rule, right? The massacres that happened, people don't realize that. The amount of Muslims that were killed by the Taliban, 6 years of just being oppressed by this Muslim group, right? They don't realize that. And then 20 years of just so many suicide bombings that happened, they don't realize that. So they have to keep this has to be kept in mind by the average Muslim, that like, when we're here fighting the Taliban, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you guys fight? Why is the resistance fighting the Taliban now? Where were they why were they not fighting the occupying forces? This is a very popular question that you see Taliban apologists pose all the time, right? Well, why weren't you guys fighting the occupying forces? And I'm going to finish here. Well, why would we fight the America, right? When in 96 to 2001, well, even before that, America helped us defeat the communists, right? The worst power in the world at the time. This was an honor for us. We defeated the communists. America was our biggest ally in doing that. So already they're on our side. Number two, from 96 to 2001, we got oppressed by the Taliban. America comes in to say, we're going to help defeat your enemies. Why would we turn that away? We said, sure, we'll take it. A lot of the people of Afghanistan welcomed it. And therefore, throughout the 20 years, they also assisted. Now, that's not to justify the collateral damage and the war crimes or mistakes that happened. That's not to dismiss that stuff. We're against that as well. The people of Afghanistan protested that. But in general, there's a bigger enemy here, and that was the Taliban. So that's why we didn't fight them, and that's why currently we're fighting the Taliban. It's just that simple, but I think a lot of people don't realize that. They just oversimplify it. All right, I'm done. I went over.
Right, no. I mean, if there's more you want to add to that, I think it's so important that we should expand even further. Who is it that said? Maybe you would know, Sabarjan. There's a saying I remember of there aren't any permanent enemies and no permanent friends, only permanent interests, right?
Oh, I don't remember who said that.
Okay, well, regardless of who said it, I think it's a very meaningful statement, and I think it applies and summarizes everything you said quite well. That this alliance, this alliance that was formed, was done for noble reasons, right? It wasn't just called the war on terror, and it was a war on innocent individuals, right?
Right.
As you said, there was collateral damage, no denial of that. That happens in every war, and nobody is justifying it.
We condemned it.
We not just condemned it, we've gone even further and farther. We're doing our utmost to hold those accountable, whether it be the country that I am a citizen of, or the United States of America, or elsewhere. We're going to hold those who are responsible for any sort of war crimes accountable. We'll do our best, and we have been. It doesn't matter whether I'm Tajik, Pashtun, Hazara, Uzbek, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole separate issue, and it's very important. Just an example of a real life example of seeing this, even here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. It was this past month of Ramadan. Mm-hmm. I attended a mosque. It wasn't a mosque that I typically attend. The programs. It was somewhere in Orange County. It's called Masjid al-Rahman. It's quite a large, very popular mosque here in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And the Islamic Society, of Orange County, I believe, it's one of the other names it goes by. But so there was a representative from CARE, the Council of America. What help me out here, Azerbaijan Council of American
like American Islamic Relations.
Islamic Relations, right?
Yeah.
So they're ultimately a lobbying group from Muslims here in the United States, right? The representative here in Los Angeles is a gentleman by the name of Hussam Ayloush, and he was there. He was there. He gave a short talk after one set of Tarawih prayers, and he mentioned atrocities taking place against Muslims in different parts of the world. He mentioned, as you mentioned earlier in this live, in relation to the Uyghurs in China, atrocities taking place against Muslims in India. And I was just sitting there waiting. Brother,
this is typical.
Ana Muslim here. Allah Akbar. What about Afghanistan? What about my motherland? That's just been, it's not just that there's a terrorist group that's attacking some different sects, mosque every few months now. No, now those terrorists are trying to run the nation, which they're miserably failing at. Shouldn't this be the first of the countries that we should be discussing or talking about? If we're truly here, right, to discuss, I mean, to and then you know what? So after that night, I was really heated that night, right? I come home and I'm like, let me just sleep on this. I want to try to see if I can reach out to this brother later, because I know Brother Hussam Ayloush. I've seen him speak in different places, and he's expressed some very extreme thoughts before as well. So I said, let me give this some time. A day or two later, I tweet about this, right, and I tagged CARE and I tagged Brother Hussam as well, right, and then all of a sudden I see a whole thread, like a at least like 7 to 10 replies on this, what turned into a thread. It was just like a two-piece tweet, 2-part-3, right?
I remember this.
It turned into a whole thread with CARE Los Angeles, the Los Angeles chapter of this national organization, tweeting their press releases condemning every one of the, or a few press releases condemning certain attacks that had happened against Muslims in Afghanistan over the span of the past few years, right? And I read it. I was like, you know what? Wow, I may have made a mistake. I may have rushed to judgment, But I said, let me go ahead and read through these. I read through each and every one of those statements, right? Not a single one of those statements actually condemned the Taliban.
Really? I didn't read those.
They condemned the atrocities. And there's a very this is somewhat nuanced, right? When I say that, there's this whole scholarly discussion for those who are into Islamic sciences that comes up as well, but without getting into all of that right now, I didn't see any condemnation. The point is, I didn't see any condemnation of the Taliban themselves, right? And I wondered why. So I asked, well, what's up with that, right? Why can you guys not condemn this group of terrorists, right? They're a group of terrorists, right? That's what they are they not? And then, there was no clear response. And I saw what this guy kept trying to do was avoid answering that question. I got very direct. I said, can you just respond to one matter for me, please? I know that today, despite many years ago, you'd consider some of the leaders of ISIS as your brothers. Today, out of fear of you potentially losing your U.S. citizenship or something of that nature or sort, you wouldn't come out and, support your ISIS brothers. I didn't say any of that, right? But I just asked this question of, are the Taliban your brothers? Would you refer to them or call them as my brothers? Right? In Islam, we're taught that all of humanity is actually brothers of one another. We're either brothers in faith or we're brothers in humanity, right? Brothers and sisters. So in faith, would you consider them your brothers? And then he responds with, would you rather have me or are you saying that I should do takfir of them? For those of you who don't know what takfir is, that is the action that many of these extremist terrorist or jihadist factions, that's the term that's the term used to declare you as an infidel, and basically your blood is now not just permissible, but it becomes obligatory for their insurgents to come after you and kill you, right? So he said, are you suggesting that I do takfir of these individuals? Where did he get that from?
Right.
I didn't make any such suggestion.
It's a straw man. That's what it is.
That's a straw man argument right there, right?
Yeah.
Now, why? Let me ask you that question, Zubair. Why are they doing this? I mean, you touched on this. You answered to
I know what the reason
degree.
is.
Tell me.
I think the main reason is people, even if they accept the truth. Sorry, am I not talking into? Even if they accept that, let's just say they, deep down, they acknowledge that, yeah, he's right. The Taliban are bad. I think people have, again, the anti-imperialist mindset. I think they just have gotten so afraid of like war that they're afraid that if I call out the Taliban, right, and if I say like #free Afghanistan, or I call out the Taliban, then that means I'm calling for more war. That means I'm calling for America to come right back in and freaking bomb the country, to smithereens, another 20 years of war. That's what they're afraid of. I think a lot of people are afraid of that. So then they'll just let's just either remain silent, or they play themselves and they trick themselves and they say, no, the Taliban are good, and they justify everything. Well, I think that's one of the main reasons, if not the reason.
I agree. I think that's probably a big part of it, if not the entire reason, right? And for anybody who this would be a general concern of theirs, right? What I really suggest is you to order this book. If you're having trouble ordering it, let me know. Reach out to us, okay? I'll get you a copy. This guy left his country, his homeland, for the mountains. It's called To the Mountains, Abdullah Anas, right? As far as practicing Muslim, you can't get more practicing than that. Right?
Yeah. He's legit.
Someone in the one of the most revered figures of the Muslim world at the time said that it's declared this fatwa, or this verdict, this a religious verdict, saying that we need to go to the aid of our Muslim brothers in Afghanistan, and without hesitation, Abdullah Anas joined. Right. So now the same individual who until today believes that was a defensive struggle and it was justified, also believes that the resistance against the Taliban is a justified one.
Yeah. So,
dear Muslim world, what Zubair John and I are trying to tell you guys here is that you've been lied to. You don't have the facts.
Yeah.
You don't need to listen to us. You don't need to just take what we're saying and go do the research. It's not quite hard. Look up the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. Do the research. Are they Muslims too or not?
Right.
Are the Hazaras? Mm-hmm. Are the Hazaras who are being genocided in Afghanistan? Are they not Muslim?
Right.
Since when did Shiite Muslims leave the fold of Islam and the Taliban have an exalted status within the Muslim world?
Mm-hmm.
They did not allow Shiite Muslims. We're in the month of Muharram right now. Shiite Muslims in Kabul, in Mazar, all across Afghanistan are not allowed to partake in mourning processions for the grandson of the holy prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What kind of Islam is this? Okay, so that's the Shiites. We have problems with them, right? They have problems. Whatever. That's the Shiites, right? Well, what about the Tajiks of Panjshir and Arab, Badakhshan, Baghlan? They're being killed on a daily basis.
Not just killed. I mean, we made the comparison to ISIS before. I mean, how many beheadings did we see? Like, unfortunately, I hate to have seen these things, right? Like, how many Twitter videos came out where you had to like scroll past it, but like, no, you kind of wanted to watch it just to see if it was real. And they're straight up cutting people's heads off of their bodies. This is the Taliban doing it, and they hold the head up and they scream Allahu Akbar while they're doing it. Like, where is this in Islam? Like, 8 years ago, whatever, we were all condemning ISIS. Nobody was gonna say no, that they're fighting, they're the liberators, right? The resistance fighters. You condemned it. What's the difference here? When the Taliban does it, when they did it for 20 years, like blowing people's body parts, like scattering children's like limbs across the street. How many suicide bombings happened, right? What's the difference?
Not only were they condemned, not only did they eventually get condemned, the vast majority of the Muslim world welcomed Western support. In Iraq itself, it didn't matter. You know, the dynamics there are different, and sectarian specific issues is what I'm referring to. But I mean, both Shias and most Sunnis, they were united in this one cause, right? You saw them being welcoming of U.S. forces to fight against ISIS, right? So again, this double standardness, this hypocrisy, this is what it is. That's what it is. It's a double standardness. It's hypocrisy. Yeah. Now, to just go back, so we can actually form a conclusion here on this, as far as this issue is concerned. This all stemmed from whether or not, the issue of the Muslim world's reaction, and how some of us who are from Afghanistan, whether diaspora or those within Afghanistan, how we feel in relation to the Muslim world's reaction, right? That's something that we wanted to also talk about and address, correct, Zubair?
How we feel to them.
So we got it clear as far as like, or we've discussed, I mean, as far as why there's this kind of a reaction.
Right.
But now we mentioned this earlier, seeing certain reactions to the Muslim world's reaction, right?
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of it I see is condemnation of the common lay and innocent people. And I would highly urge for my dear and fellow compatriots to reconsider that approach. Yes, the world at large, not just the Muslim world, but the world at large has betrayed us, has betrayed our people. Afghanistan has been forgotten. But again, and we weren't, Zubair made this clarification, but we just have to see why the vast majority do have the false narrative in their hands. And so what we should, in my humble opinion, be doing instead of these very emotional reactionary kinds of efforts that sometimes take place, we really need to educate, raise more awareness on, and speak to especially the common lay people of these Muslim societies, and educate them, inform them, let them know that there's a struggle in Afghanistan to rid the country from not just a proxy force of another country's, not that, but a group who's actually a disgrace to the religion of Islam. If you are a Muslim, if you are a practicing Muslim, if you care for the Muslim Ummah, if you care about Islam, if you care about your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wallahi, my dear brothers and sisters, you will be asked about this. We will all be asked about this. The Taliban do not represent an iota of what Islam stands for.
Mm-hmm.
We can go ahead and do a proper recap of every one of the reasons. We can go ahead and right now start working on an open letter to however the hell his name's even pronounced, the dude who turns his back towards his followers, right? The leader of the Taliban, right? Hybatullah, no, it should be Ghaibatullah because he's constantly in occultation or Ghaibat, right? But this individual, right? So the Muslim Ummah had a reaction to al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. There was this one of the initiatives that took place was the open letter to al-Baghdadi, right? We didn't see that when it came to Afghanistan. And I'm not going to sit here and point my finger and say, hey, you should have done this, or you could have done this or that, or whatever, right? But I will speak to my dear compatriots, my fellow compatriots, and say, hey, let's get together and let's work on starting and working on these kinds of initiatives. Let's engage with the commonly of all of these Muslim countries, Muslim society, and raise more awareness and clear the narrative for them. I think that's when it comes to the Muslim world, that is you addressed that, you provided us, and I agreed with you with your analysis on why they have this wrong understanding of what actually happened, right? But in terms of what we can do to help remedy that situation, this is something. This is the only thing that really we can do, right? A lot of what we just said right now also does apply to the non-Muslim world too. It's ultimately for the same reason. The narratives are slightly different, but ultimately lies, deception, right? I'll never forget. No matter how hard I've tried, like I've had nightmares, bro. This seeing Biden's ugly face and lying in front of the camera and putting the blame on those who are ready to sacrifice their blood. I spoke to former ANDSF members, right? Who would tell me that we'd break bread with these Americans. We would invite them to our homes. For us, it wasn't like, oh, we're just allies. We treated them as brothers. Think about that for a second. And then Biden, not only, did you just betray them in a literal sense, but then you stab them in the back too and say that they were cowards? They couldn't fight their own fight? The disintegration of the government happened that fast because of the National Defense and Security Forces?
Right.
Whether the Muslim world or non-Muslim world, it was lies. All part of this all part of this great conspiracy to try and fool the world that there's such a thing as Taliban 2.0, a new and reformed version of a former terrorist group, as if terrorists can evolve and become peace, love. What do they call themselves these days? Some of those sympathizers, that one joke of a figure, Jalal or something like that, a peace activist. Is that what they call themselves? Peace activist? Former terrorist, now peace activist?
Yeah.
You've got the likes of Hikmatyar's grandson coming and lecturing others on morality today. What the hell is going on in our world today? Muslim world, non-Muslim world alike. This double standardness, this hypocrisy needs to end. So those are a few different tangents that I don't even think we had planned as a John to really go on and discuss. Emotions are all over the place. I apologize to our viewers for being so scatterbrained. We've been these have been some really tough times. These have been some really tough times. I know, and I won't go into more. I've spoken a lot already, but my life, and I know Zubair John, this applies to him as well. Had an entire 180-degree turn since last August, and we're from Afghanistan but living abroad. Just think about all of those individuals in Afghanistan, all those girls with dreams and aspirations who haven't been able to step foot into school. What do they want? They want to learn. They want their basic rights. So, with all that being said, now I digress and I go back to earlier in the episode when you asked of me, Zubair John, what is the most important thing? I think that was your question. If not, I apologize. But I think the most important thing is to remain optimistic regardless of how difficult circumstances can get. And alhamdulillah, all praise is due to God, that despite many of the political elites, if not all, having sold out, we had one man who took a stand, formed a group called the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. They're leading a solid effort in combating extremism and terrorism in Afghanistan, so as to prevent Afghanistan from further becoming a safe haven for international terrorism. It's already underway. We saw that. Zawahiri's assassination just last week proved that.
Mm-hmm.
Zawahiri's assassination, it wasn't the end of it either. So the greatest, the most significant, the most important thing, okay, good job. Withdrawals done, world of the West. Now, if we want to be on the right side of history, there's only one thing to do. And that's to stand with, support the only remaining democratic forces fighting for the restoration of freedom, justice, and peace in Afghanistan, that being the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, led by Commander Ahmad Massoud. Yeah. Zubair John, if you, on my end, I mean, we've gone over what we initially intended, and on my end, I have nothing more to really add or say. If you have any closing remarks, please go ahead. And then before ending our episode, let's just also share with our viewers a little a brief summary of what's about to come and what the future of Radio Resistance will look like. Because Radio Resistance is an effort that started with you and myself, right? A few months ago, and we've had some plans, but due to there being so many different things going on, not everything has gone according to our initial plans. But we have a few special episodes stored and in mind, and we'd like to share that with. I think it would be nice to share that with our viewers as well. Yeah, please, if you have anything to add or anything else you think that would be worthy to discuss on today's episode.
Well, I mean, we did go over time, so I don't want to lengthen it, but
that's my fault. I'm sorry, bro. I tend to go on these rants.
No, we both did. No, so it's okay. I just think it's important for people to know. I know we said we didn't want to necessarily do a recap of everything that happened, right? But I think it's just important for people to know that the in the past year, the Taliban have not changed. That's obvious, right? The same mentality exists. What they did, how they ruled from 96 to 2001, same thing. They're still attacking ethnic minorities, religious minorities. They're still displacing people, from their the areas which they live in. They're still committing, human rights violations left and right. They're still not allowing girls to go to school, right? Teenage girls are not allowed to go to school. Women have been virtually erased from society. They're not allowed to work in almost the majority of workplaces. Even just being out in public, they're restricted from going out like to parks and stuff on certain days. The clothing that they wear, they're restricted. So in terms of like ideology, they haven't changed one bit. It's exactly the same. And then in terms of what they've achieved, we don't need to explain this. You just have to look, right? You just have to look what they did from 96 to 2001. If you know that history and you compare it to what's happening right now, it's the same thing. In terms of ideology, they're still terrorists. Terrorists don't change their ideology. They still believe in blowing people up. They took pride in this, right? They have a suicide bombing unit currently in place right now. Achievements, they haven't achieved anything. I mean, they've plunged the entire country into the worst economic crisis. People are starving. And you can't blame when people say, oh, well, that's because of the sanctions. Well, why are there sanctions? Maybe if they behaved like normal people, like a normal government, right, there wouldn't be sanctions, right? Maybe if you simply allowed girls to go to school, there'd be a lot more money flowing in. But of the money flowing in, the millions of dollars that we see on a weekly basis, they're just misappropriating funds. They're spending it on their own soldiers. They're sending all the soldiers to the north of the country specifically, and they're killing people. There's just mass killings. When they can't put up a fight against the resistance, they go after civilians. And I think this is what people aren't understanding. All the promises that they made that came, after the Doha talk that they were supposed to adhere by, they violated all of that. General amnesty, we've seen reports that they've killed hundreds. It was like, I think 500 documented soldiers, former security forces. But we see it happen on the daily. No general amnesty, no inclusive government. Their government is just full of terrorist men. What else? Just violating human rights. There's zero women's rights.
Targeting of specific ethnic groups as well.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
yeah.
Forced displacements.
Yep.
Human trafficking, antiquity trafficking. Remember the backtree gold, drug trafficking, whatever crime. What crime is there that they have not committed? What crime is there that would what action of theirs has not been directly a crime or an act of terror, right?
Yeah. So then those are their negative actions, and so what do they achieve? Absolutely nothing, because like you just said, every action of theirs is just a negative action. It's a crime. It's an act of terror, an act of it's a criminal act. So they've achieved nothing. I don't understand till this day how people can whitewash.
They achieved one thing.
What's that?
They achieved in isolating Afghanistan from the rest of the world.
That's pretty much it.
That's what they've achieved. Their biggest accomplishment was, well, everything else you mentioned, those are their achievements, right?
Yeah.
Putting our country in an economic crisis, in a political crisis, economic, humanitarian, both go hand in hand. These are their achievements.
Security wise,
Security.
when some people say, oh, at least they brought security. Oh yeah, we have a bombing happen every other week at a mosque. Just we see videos of people getting shot up and beheaded. Yeah, that's great security, right? And then the crazy part is it's like, oh, well, what's the alternative, right? Well, what are we gonna do? Do we want more bomb? Do you want more 20 years of war? No, it's like we listed it before. There is an alternative, right? If you want to talk Muslim, it's a Muslim group. If you want to talk about moderate, it's moderate. If you want to talk about, oh, well, what are they? Do they have a plan? We just saw the other day they put out their list of principles, and when you read through that, when you read through it, and it's backed up by the leader's statements and his history and his character, it's like, how can you disagree with this? It's like, how can you say that? No, I don't really agree with these things. Especially when you're living like in America. You're living in the West. You adhere to these values. This is what allows you to go to, you went to school by virtues of these principles, these democratic principles and values. You earn a living, right? The job that you have, the society that you live in. This is just ingratitude by anyone that's living in the West and that continues to not only they think that bashing the resistance is a better thing than calling out the Taliban. This is hypocrisy and just ingratitude from a spiritual level, from so many perspectives to the max. Yeah, supposedly, if you're gonna continue to whitewash and support a group that has killed so many people and that's just caused so much sorrow and misery to millions of people, then there's no hope in such a person. And I just pray that we find guidance. And that's it, man. That's all I got for you. I think we should probably wrap it up. If you got anything, go ahead.
No, you're right. And it's been a whole hour and a half. Just thank you for everybody who's tuned in. It has been, as we mentioned, a year of darkness for our people. And but as also mentioned, there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that's what we're all clinging on to. It would mean the world and beyond to each and every one of us from Afghanistan for you to show to the extent of your capabilities, but to recognize our resistance. We see, Ukraine being, and all hats off to those resisting, whether it be in Ukraine, whether it be in Palestine, whether it be wherever it may be, right? An indigenous resistance by the people, for the people, is always admirable and respect-worthy and noteworthy, right? But what about ours? Commander Ahmad Massoud, did not have what Zelensky has, and yet he hasn't given up. So August 15th, 2021, in the words of a pretty prominent journalist, I saw this on her Instagram story. She said that the day we lost our country and the world just watched. Nili Kohzad with CNN, she had mentioned this, and and I read that, that's in a nutshell, that's literally it. 8/15/2021, the day we lost our country and the world just watched. Comments are incoming right now. I did want to go ahead and end it right here, but we have someone who just asked about news from Panjshir. So the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan's official on their website and on their Twitter page as well. You can go and hit and check. And so at NRFAFG on Twitter, you can go and see the latest. But today there were some offensives that took place, and the National Resistance Front were successful in their battles over, I think it was 20 or 30 casualties from the Taliban, and certain certain districts that were under Taliban control were taken back. But it's a guerrilla warfare that the National Resistance Front has adopted, and that is part of their military strategy at the moment. The leader himself has mentioned this in his latest interview, that the actual recapturing of these districts as a long-term, for the long term right now, is not part of the military strategy, right? So yeah, that's a little gist of it, brother Mazdak. I see, and you could, like, as I said, thing. And just a shout out real quick before we end this episode to another prominent journalist who's been covering all news relating to all of Afghanistan, but has been doing a great job when it comes to the happenings and the events relating to the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, and events that are taking place specifically in northern Afghanistan and Panjshir more so specifically. Brother Muhammad Natiq Malikzada on Twitter at Natiq Malikzada. We can, I think, go ahead and share it as a comment here. Go ahead and do that. And so you guys can follow his page as well, to stay up to date as far as the latest events and happenings for all of Afghanistan, but also specifically the happenings of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. With my again sincerest gratitude and appreciation to each and every one of you for joining us today. I mentioned this a couple times, but I promise this will be the last. I'm done, guys.
Yeah,
I'm done.
People are done with us tonight.
Hey, we've had the same amount of viewers who have stayed with us, it seems, for the whole hour and a half. So again, thank you guys for bearing with us. But I promise we do have some very special. Oh yeah, we did mention that we're gonna end with this. We have some very special things in store for you guys.
Okay, let's start with the first one. What would you say?
Well, before we mention those specific episodes, one thing we're aiming to do one episode between Zubairjan and myself, and then an episode where we bring a special guest, and you guys can feel free to send us suggestions of those who you'd like to see on our podcast as well.
So alternating, you mean?
Yes, we'll be alternating between episodes with the two of us and that.
And the next episode with the guest. And then back to the two of us, back to a guest. Right. So this is episode 4.
This would be episode number 4, our first time going live. And
so this one doesn't count in terms of the pattern. So we're gonna have a guest on the next one, right?
Yes. You want to spill the beans?
Is it confirmed? I mean,
well, I guess there are 2 confirmations, right? So it's your call, Zubairjan. It's your call, Zubairjan.
No, go ahead.
Let's see if we get any live comments coming in right now. We do have live comments coming in, but how badly do you guys want to know what our next episode, the guest for our next episode? Ultimately, it's your call, Zubairjan.
Are you asking me or the audience? I thought you were.
I was asking the audience, but I mean, I don't know how fast and quick this.
Yeah, I don't think we should wait for them.
Yeah.
No, yeah, let them know. I mean, it's okay. Well, how about the gist of the episode? What did we want to do? What type of? We wanted to invite. I know at one point, I'll just say it. We wanted to have a woman, a female guest, right?
Right.
To discuss their take on the whole issue surrounding, women in Afghanistan, how the Taliban have affected women's rights, girls' education, and all that, the lives of women in Afghanistan. This should have been something that we did from the beginning, but it's, certain people have security issues, and, honestly, a lot of people troll and make fun of people like us, that they're like, oh, look at you guys, you're resisting from behind the computer. There's like, or
Cyber resistance.
cyber resistance, or as they say in Farsi, like Zeri Kampal and stuff like that. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing, but since when in the history of ever of our time did supporting a resistance group, right, mean that you have to go and fight there, otherwise you can't do it at all, right? It's like when they do it with Palestine, right? It's like free Palestine, all hashtags and just whatever. It's okay. That criticism doesn't apply there. But when we do it to defend our country, it's like, oh, you guys are doing it through the internet. You're leading a resistance through the internet. No, the resistance just today took back a district. There's photos of them with like dozens of Taliban members that they captured and that they're treating properly in accordance to humanitarian law, the rules of war, Islamic law. What is that? And that's happened multiple times. We shot down a helicopter. We took multiple captives. We took back multiple districts. Taliban have constantly begged and pleaded for the resistance to, step down from the mountains and stuff like that. So if the resistance was purely through the internet and us being on Twitter, then honestly, we should keep at it because it's working. We're doing a good job. But anyway, how did that come up? That was a tangent. I forgot.
No, and just in relation to what our plans are for future episodes and all that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the woman of Afghanistan. Oh yeah, them not wanting to join a podcast specifically showing their face because they could get, some of them are afraid that they might get harassed or targeted or stuff. Here we go. That. That's the reality.
Brother Mazdak Bom Dodon, I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, dear brother, but he says it's a good idea. Our dear sister Marina Habibi, she says that's badly needed as well. We're getting some positive feedback, so yeah, let's just leave them with that for now, guys. We won't drop any names because there's a few things that need to be confirmed as well, but
okay,
yeah. And then also just one other episode that was planned, and we're in the month of Muharram. I do just want to mention this, that for us Muslims, irrespective of your sectarian views, it's a very important time of the year, and there's a direct correlation between any resistance movements in this time of the year, especially those Islamic resistance movements or any type of jihad, right? On the 10th of Muharram, the day of Ashura, right, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be on him, was martyred by a corrupt and evil tyrant of his time, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And there are a lot of lessons, there are a lot of important lessons that I believe we can draw from the events that took place on the day of Ashura in the Battle of Karbala, and they directly correlate with what's happening in Afghanistan. Some claim that this is actually a tradition that's been documented in books, and some say that it may have just been a quote from a prominent scholar, but that quote goes along the lines of every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. And today's Karbala in our motherland is Panjshir. Yeah. It's been Ashura for 365 days. Kabul, Panjshir, Mazar, every single province, every single city of Afghanistan, we've been experiencing Ashura Husseini. And quite literally this month as well, Shiite mosques were bombed again. Sure, ISIS took responsibility, but the Taliban and ISIS, they're they have no difference in belief when it comes to their views towards Shiite Muslims who were attacked. So that's another episode for y'all to stay tuned for. And yeah, so we've got those 2 episodes. We just leaked some special news for you guys. Again, thank you all for tuning in. And this time for real. Final thing, do hit the subscribe, hit the like, share the podcast with your friends, family. Please, please, please get the word out. We promise we're going to be putting in more effort and we'll be listening to your feedback, and trying our best to improve and enhance our podcast. But we definitely need your support as well in helping to amplify our voice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Just for my part, I just want to also express any my apologies for any mistakes or any if we bored you or if we've been inconsistent or whatnot. I'm not making excuses, but at the end of the day, we do have lives and we have full-time jobs that we work, and we also have tons of other projects that we're working on for the cause of Afghanistan. So that being said, I definitely we're going to be working much more diligently and putting more of an effort to produce more consistent episodes and to produce just better quality and having guests on and making it more entertaining. So just bear with us for now, and I think going forward it'll be much better, inshallah, God willing. So thank you. And I think that should be it, right? Should we end the
Yes,
live?
sir. Yep, let's go ahead and end our broadcast. Again, thank you all, and may God be with you.
Thank you.
Khadafis.
Khadafis.